Hello. I thought ahead of the streaming of the Elgar's great work, The Dream of Gerontius, from the UNESCO Philharmonic this coming Thursday, particularly in the context of the current crisis, it would be worth asking a few questions about the work and the time we currently find ourselves in. So the first question I'm going to consider is the meaning of The Dream of Gerontius for a British audience and for me in particular, and why it's important to listen to this work at Easter time. So there's a tradition in England and in Britain as a whole at Easter of listening to Handel's Messiah, which we kind of think of as a British work, as we very much adopted Handel as our own in London, although of course it was premiered in Dublin. We also, like everybody else, often perform Bach's Passions during Easter week. In a way, it was very brave of the Roman Catholic Elgar to base a work around Cardinal Newman's poem, The Dream of Gerontius, the story of a man at the point of death, through his death, to the point of his judgment before God, before entering purgatory. Britain was very much a Protestant country at the turn of the 20th century, and Catholics were very much looked down upon or even feared, so it was a very risky topic for Elgar to take on. However, the work soon became accepted as probably the greatest of British oratorios, although Elgar himself didn't like the word oratorio as a description for it, and it became an absolute staple for British choirs and orchestras, being performed all year round, but particularly before Easter. And there's no doubt that it speaks to all of us about our journeys through life and our relationship to death, whatever our religious background. And the idea of a flawed individual coming before God is certainly one with universality. There are also parallels with Wagner's Easter opera, Parsifal. Elgar spent many years imbibing Wagner's musical language. The character of Gerontius, a flawed but devout man, very much an everyman, perhaps represents Elgar's view of himself. And the chromatic writing which Elgar uses describing the agony of Gerontius runs closely in parallel to the chromatic writing representing the agony of Amfortas in Parsifal. Similarly, the more diatonic writing of the angel, and particularly the angel's farewell, it seems to me, are deeply influenced by the diatonic writing to be found in Parsifal, and I think the angel's farewell itself is very much modelled on the Good Friday music. And the priest's music, on the other hand, reflects the influence of Wagner's writing for Gurnemanz, and also to some extent Wotan in the Ring Cycle. So the next question I'm going to consider is, do I believe that online streaming is helping the music industry and musicians these days? So I think it's essential to remind everybody that they all need music. At the moment, our entire profession has shut down all over the world, and yet it is at exactly a time like this that we need music most of all. This is the first time in human history that, as musicians, we've not been able to make music in the normal way at a point of crisis. So musicians everywhere are finding novel and innovative ways of keeping the music alive. So the next question I'm going to consider, how is the pandemic affecting musicians? Many musicians are meeting and making live online concerts. How is this music filtered by the computer affecting the energy of their normal performances? So, many musicians have lost the means of making a living during the pandemic. Orchestras and management companies have gone bankrupt, and orchestral players have been laid off. Many freelance players suddenly find they have no means of making a living. And yet, many of these musicians are finding ways of keeping the music going via online concerts and so on. Of course, it's impossible to recreate the feelings of a live concert online. Even with the amazing technology we have today, There are problems which place obstacles that prevent us from having quite the same experience online as we have live. However, there are some incredibly moving performances that have been appearing online that really speak to us and speak to our humanity in this point of crisis. What changes do I think will occur after the crisis? What is the tough lesson musicians are learning now, and how do I think society will change? So who knows what the future will bring? I am, however, sure that the world will be a very changed place when we finally get through the crisis, and we'll look back on the COVID-19 crisis as a world-changing event that will shape all of us. I'm, for one, trying to use the time to think about what is important to me, both in life and in music, and hope very much I will come out the other side a better person for it. I know that whatever happens, we all need live music more than ever.